beautiful also.
Ron Allen, who's a kind of a bigwig preacher, he used to be a preacher in Grand Island. He's a disciple minister. I don't know where he is now, but he had an experience where he was called to be on a panel, and the panel it was the topic was the issues that are facing teens today, and they were big when we were growing up. They're big every generation. It seems that there's a whole another layer of possibilities, and with the internet now and the many dangers that are out there. My kids are raising their teenagers, and some of the things that they have to worry about, I didn't even think of. So this panel was a school counselor, a drug and alcohol counselor, a juvenile judge, and this minister. And they were to ask them questions. And the first lady stood up, and she had lost control of her daughter. Like, well, that's the first thing. No, who has control over their daughter completely? Yeah. So, but she was exasperated, and she then went on to blame the church. It was the church's fault because the church no longer teaches the Ten Commandments. And Ron Allen asked her, well, do you even know the Ten Commandments? Well, of course I do. I said, well, go ahead and name them. So she named 3, and then she quoted a couple of Shakespeare quotes, and then she got flustered and she sat down. For any of us to name all of the Ten Commandments, it might be tough. But the Ten Commandments are not magical. But the Ten Commandments, they are the basis of Western law. This is the first place where all of these were pulled together. Now, there's the Code of Hammurabi. There are other cultures that have different lists of rules, but this is the first place where this comprehensive, and it is comprehensive, but it's also very succinct and precise. This is the first place where these are drawn together. So I want to talk about the Ten Commandments today. And I know that we technically do not live by the Ten Commandments. We live by the law of love. I will get into that just a little bit more later on. But listen to this version comes from Exodus, the 20th chapter. I'm going to read verses 1 through 21, probably. And God spoke all these words. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. And you've heard me say, that's the big one. I don't know if these are in the, I don't know if this is a top 10 list. I don't think it's the order of importance. But idolatry, to have other gods before God, in Judeo-Christian culture, that is the big one. You shall not make for yourself an idol in any form of anything in heaven above or of down to the earth and worship them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the fathers to the 3rd and 4th generation. By the way, that has been abolished in Ezekiel. We find out that we are responsible for our own sins. No longer will the saying be true that the father eats sour grapes and the son's teeth turn on edge. That's another way of saying we're all responsible for ourselves, for our own actions. Not that there are not consequences that happen, but in terms of responsibility, we become responsible for ourselves. which is really, really good, and also kind of hard sometimes because we have no one to blame. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord your God will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses his name. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son or daughter, nor your manservant or maidservant, nor your animal, nor your alien within your gates. For in the 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, and the sea, and all that is in them, but he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Honor your father and mother, so that you may live long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery, but you shall not murder. In King James it says, thou shalt not kill. This is the accurate translation. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his manservant or maidservant, his ox or his donkey. And I'm here to tell you, I have never coveted my neighbor's ox or donkey. I can tell you that with 100% certainty. Hey, or anything else that belongs to your neighbor. When the people saw the thunder and the lightning and heard the trumpet and saw the mountain in smoke, they trembled for fear. They stayed in the distance and said to Moses, speak to us yourself and we will listen, but do not have God speak to us or we will die. Moses said to the people, do not be afraid. God has not come to test you, so as the fear of God will be with you when you're keeping us from the sinning. The people remained at a distance while Moses approached the thick darkness where God was. I'm going to stop there. Now, pre-Exodus, so the second book of the Bible is called Exodus. It means getting out of Dodge. That's what Exodus means. It means leaving. Pre-Exodus, and they were leaving slavery in Egypt for hundreds of years. They did not have 10 Commandments. They were, maybe they were simply had their minds about survival and doing what they were told to do. But after the Exodus, when they were going out and they were in the wilderness, God gave them these commandments. There's some folks who say that we have not repealed any of these commandments whatsoever. There is a caveat to this, though. I would say that we do not keep the Sabbath day. The Sabbath was Saturday. It was the seventh day. And it was a day of rest, a day dedicated to the Lord. And they were very specific about you were not supposed to work on this day. We don't do that anymore. If you grew up in the Christian church, we used to say, and even though it's inaccurate, it's one of those Sunday school lies, we used to call Sunday the Christian Sabbath. There is no such thing. The Sabbath day is Saturday. It's the seventh day. That's the Sabbath day. We do not keep the Sabbath. And there are a whole lot of admonitions in the New Testament why we do not do that, because we technically no longer keep the law. See, the problem with law is the law never stays the 10 Commandments. We then keep defining what that means. What about this circumstance? And so law after law after law after law Kosher laws came about. What do you eat? What do you not eat? There's a segment of Christianity called the Seventh-day Adventists. They try to keep kosher. They meet on Saturdays. And it's simply a way to try to keep the Sabbath holy, to keep the Ten Commandments. But we don't keep the Sabbath holy. We don't rest on Saturday. I don't know anyone who does. So we have changed this. This is the Christian modern thought. The idea of rest, that's what's important. And the idea of having things dedicated to God, having God important in our life, that's what the Sabbath is about now. So that's the caveat. I don't know anyone who keeps Sabbath except some Orthodox Jews. But the Ten Commandments are amazing. You go through them quickly. The first four, they have to do with our relationship to God. So the first commandment affirms the supremacy of God by declaring, "You shall have no other gods before me." Those of us who are familiar with Jehovah's Witnesses, they never say God, they say Jehovah, and it's simply a translation of the Hebrew word for God, Yahweh. So they worship Yahweh God. By the way, so do we. There are a number of names for God, and that is included in them. But you'll have no other gods before me. The second commandment declares that worshiping other God, we're worshiping gods that we make is also wrong. You shall not make for yourself a graven image. The third commandment forbids the reckless use of God's name in pledges or in vows. Or if you grew up where I did, you couldn't say God recklessly in any kind of curse word. To recklessly use the name of the Lord. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. So I don't think it's just cursing though. And in fact, I think it does more apply to what we attribute to God and what we don't. And taking God's name recklessly and who we give credit for, and in vows, that is a different story. Many times when we say something profaning in God's name, when we say, "Oh God," what we're really saying is "Wow," or sometimes when we ask God to damn things, it's almost, that is a prayer. But this has to do with oaths and vows. The fourth commandment reminds us of the sacredness of the Sabbath, and I talked about that a little bit. We learn to give God a prominent place in our lives. That's what the first four commandments are all about. Not long ago, I read a book about Jimmy Carter. Even though he had some bad luck as president, embargo, hostages, he was a nominee for the Nobel Peace Prize. Bill Moyers interviewed him, and he asked Jimmy Carter what was the biggest thing, since he's been president, what's the biggest thing in his life that he has learned? What's the most important thing? And Jimmy Carter kind of grinned, and he said he was a little embarrassed to talk about it because it's so personal. But he said that the most significant discovery was the one that he had because of his relationship with God through Jesus Christ. That was the most significant part of his life. How many of us can actually say that with a straight face? That's what the first four commandments are about. Our relationship with God. The rest of the commandments, they have to do with our relationship with other people. And they seem so common sense, but in many ways, there's no such thing as common sense. Common sense becomes common when a group of people, when a culture of people believe it to be true. That's then what the common sense is. The common sense of our day is not the common sense of 100 years ago. It's also not the common sense of other cultures. So when we say things are common sense, it depends on where you are. It's very relative. So we would think that these next 6, well, everybody knows that, but not everybody does. Not everybody knows it. I have been amazed in family therapy, what's because of, I need to say this delicately, what you and I would call a horrific thing, some families think are normal because that's the way it's always been. And so for that family, that is common sense. That's the way everybody does it. And when they leave the home, they find out that that's not true. It's a mind-blowing experience to realize that some of the things that you've been taught that are just supposedly normal are hurtful. That's what these commandments are. They're rules for us that we need to keep in the forefront of our mind. So here we go. The 5th commandment affirms the importance of home when it challenges us to honor our father and our mother. That was one of my mom's favorite commandments, by the way. The 6th commandment speaks of the sacredness of human life when it states, you shall not murder. It isn't you shall not kill, because there is a human right to self-defense, but you shall not murder. Take someone else's life. It is, for many of us, that would be something that would be hard to live with. The 7th commandment affirms the sacredness of marriage when it declares you shall not commit adultery. The 8th commandment cautions us against the temptation of taking what is not ours when it says you shall not steal. The 9th commandment demands that we must live by truth when it declares you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. By the way, that's one that I think many of us have forgotten all about too. And the 10th commandment warns about the peril of greed when it states you shall not covet. Covet is not wanting something. Coveting is it's an attitude. This is one of the attitudinal commandments. It's the attitude that you want something your neighbor has and you don't want them to have it. You deserve it more than they do, and you don't want them to have it. We think these are common sense. Jesus surmised them we are called to love our neighbors. We're supposed to love our neighbors as we love ourselves. The golden rule is treat others the way that we want to be treated. You would think that these are common sense things. Case in point, not everything is common sense here. We're driving Winninghoff Farms. It's a little truck farm it's close to our house. It's by Emmanuel Hospital, and they've had fields for years. They grow all sorts of vegetables, corn, melons, the whole gamut. And so it's kind of like a farmer's market that goes on all summer long. And so we try to frequent them. They had a bunch of pumpkins growing out in the field really close to the street. And one of my grandsons says, hey, we need to get a pumpkin. I said, well, we need to go buy a pumpkin. No, it'd be a lot easier. Why don't we just steal that pumpkin? No. And so we would think that that'd be common sense, that he would know not to steal, but he didn't. He thought that would be the easy way. Now, I didn't tell him that it would also be really fun to do, and there's a right way to steal a pumpkin. I did not tell him that, because we've all stolen a pumpkin before. And pumpkin is a metaphor here, folks. There ain't nothing better tasting than a snished watermelon, and or apples.
A pear off the neighbor's tree.
A pear off the neighbor's tree. Oh, so sweet, so sweet. See, look, this is confession time.
I was going to say plums, but that's okay.
Corn from the field.
Corn from the field. I used to like to steal apples from the neighbor's tree so I could throw them at the buses that went by. That's good, clean fun too. Oh, that's why I went to juvenile hall too. That's a joke. I didn't really go to juvenile hall because I never got caught. So you get the point. You'd think that these things are common sense, but they are not common sense. Because we all have a proclivity at times to want to do something that even when we may know that it's wrong, to still want to do it. That's why the New Testament writers talked about when Christianity was new and was mostly a Jewish sect, there were many people who wanted to say, no, you got to be these Gentiles who are receiving the Spirit, you got to become a Jew first and then become a Christian. To be a first-class Christian, you had to become a Jew. And the writers of the New Testament universally agreed, eventually, why would we put this burden, this yoke, something we couldn't do ourselves? Why would we make them do something that we couldn't even do? Christianity is a clean slate. I love Peter's dream. And he was told to eat of what? This Jewish boy, told to eat, kill and eat. Don't call unclean what God has declared clean. So technically we don't live by the Ten Commandments, but they are still eternal truths. They are a way for each one of us to live our lives in a right and holy way. Not only in the eyes of God, but also by the way we simply treat other people. It seems so simple, and yet in many ways, it is really, really hard. There was a music instructor who had his shop as well. And those of us who grew up playing stringed instruments, they were always breaking. You always had to go through the repair shop because the fingerboard, the bridge, there's something wrong. You need new strings. Something would come unglued, and so and I played the cello. So in Minnesota, when you play the cello, I would not recommend it because in Minnesota, snowballs are a very important part of the culture. And when you carry the cello, that is also a very easy target. And when you hit it dead on, it makes this bong sound that I can still hear in my head. There's a man who repaired instruments, and he was kind of a wisdom of the day kind of a guy, folksy kind of guy. And what's the good news for the day? He would always say. He had a tuning fork hanging from a wire, and he struck that tuning fork, and it is when you play a stringed instrument, the pitch that you go off is A. I think I have that in my head. And that's what you tune off of. Don't ask me what band is different. B flat, they have spit valves, and they go off a whole different set of notes. I don't understand. But A, that constant A, that's the tone that all other tones are tuned by. That is the constancy that is always there. By the way, that's also mathematics. That's always there. It's a constant. And in our faith walk and in our practical life walk has nothing to do with faith. Just the way we live and treat other people, the Ten Commandments are there for us to tune the rest of our lives to. And that happens over and over again. Are we in tune with the commandments of God? Amen.